Thank you. Thank you for joining. And we're about to kick off the panel on the World Academy's projects and the focus it will have strategically now to focus on six interesting initiatives and programs and to raise the funding for that. I'm delighted to welcome 5 panelists and our president and CEO, Gary Jacobs. Gary, can I hand to you to say a few words, and then I will kick into the agenda that we have.
My few words will be just to give a little background, because I want to thank you and other members of the Development Committee who have been working very hard for the last, it's about a year and a half, especially to get the formulation of our presentation of ourselves to the fundraising community and identification of a full range, or I'd call it palette, of projects that we would like to have already underway by us and our partners. Some of them we're in the process of launching, and many of them, or most of them, how far we can go will depend on our fundraising capabilities. We're going ahead, but we need to do a lot more. And I think I'd just like to say, since you gave me the opportunity, after the UN approved, for 1.5 years, we were working with the UN to get approval for HS4A, and it took all the energy of top management, and we really neglected other important functions, most of all communication with our fellows, because we didn't know what to tell anybody. We weren't sure of what the outcome would be. And after we got the approval, which was in end of September 2022, the demands of the project and the demands of the UN completely absorbed the top management on an almost day-to-day basis, because the standards they expected and the goals, the achievements they expected were very demanding. And we had originally thought that we would be involving at least 50 or more of our fellows very actively in all of the campaign projects, because we knew we couldn't do it by ourselves. And then, to our surprise, the UN wanted to very strictly and severely control who was involved in the project, as if they don't know us personally, something like that. So we had a 1.5 years of silence almost. We tried to communicate through the newsletters, but the whole purpose of this GA was to try to open this up again and really make all our fellows part of the discussion and part of the participation. And now we're in a much better position to do that, but we need everybody's help for the design, financing, and implementation of the programs, these and others along the way. So it's yours, Ketan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gary. Thank you very much. We have 5 panelists for you to walk us through the program that came out of our strategy days at Athens last year. I'm going to introduce them very briefly. Most of them don't need an introduction. They're long-standing members of the World Academy, and a few of them are new to working with us, particularly since we had the HS4A project. Grant Schreiber, he's a general manager, and he's played a very important leading role in HS4A. Ralph Wolff, who is the former president of the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, director at the World University Consortium, and a trustee of the World Academy, focused on transforming education and learning. Nebojša, who everyone knows, I'm sure, is vice president of the World Academy, president of the Serbian chapter of the Club of Rome, focused on science for human security and sustainable development. CHANDRASEKARAN, senior research fellow of the Mothers Service Society in India, a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in India too, and focused on AI. Jonathan Miller, John is CEO, Integrated Media Company, is on the advisory council as a member of Force for Good, and former CEO of AOL, CEO and chairman of AOL, and a fellow at the World Academy, focused on global citizen and partnership. Let me kick off just briefly by saying I'm delighted we're pulling this together. I'm also, as some of you may know, a member of the World Academy of Art and Science, on the Board of Trustees, and part of our leadership team. We have spent a lot of time drawing together the essence of the strategy so that it can be presented to the outside world. This presentation isn't that, it's a combination of the stories that we want to tell you to explain to you what the strategy is and what the programs are. Well, I'll begin with this actually, and this is very pertinent to where we've been, but where we are now again. We're at that time in history again, with a far more greater ability to create a better future and to destroy it. And it's poignant that actually this has gripped people, and the idea of human security for all goes hand in hand with the idea that we have science and technology that can create a far better future or a far worse one if we don't focus on the right things and the right values and work together towards solutions. Just a brief reminder of Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General's calling really for us, that we're on a path which requires us to fight for our lives, and we're losing that fight today on multiple levels, whether it's climate or the world order or poverty and wealth and its distribution, nationalism, and a whole range of other issues that actually threaten the planet, and really call for the World Academy and other institutions to step up to see if we can make a big difference. The World Academy has a unique perspective, and working together, that's been articulated so that we can present it very forcefully to the world. We advance universal human rights. We provide the policy guidance now for parliamentarians. We are highlighting untapped opportunities for policymakers. We wish to promote innovative financial solutions. We have a person-centric, contextual, transdisciplinary, value-based approach to rolling out our program. We're transnational in the approach to the threats, the risks, the responsibilities. We've integrated perspectives to surmount the limitations. We believe in catalytic strategies and wish to promote those to create the awareness. And we're fostering a shared global human identity and consciousness. As you can see, this combines the science and the arts and requires the World Academy to play a global role in making an impact, a measurable impact, not just in our thinking, but in the execution of that thinking too. And that's been translated into 6 initiatives. These 6 are the Human Security Campaign, Financing Sustainable Development, Transforming Education and Learning, the Science for Human Security and Sustainable Development, AI and Virtual Reality Learning, and Global Citizenship Participation. Each of the panelists will walk us through these very briefly. I'll ask each of you, please, to be very disciplined so we have some time for questions at the end. And we will spend something like 7 to 8 minutes walking through each of these so you have an understanding of what the aim is, what the goals are, and potentially what's been achieved so far. Let me kick off with the first one, Human Security for All. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Ketan, and thank you for having me on this discussion today, which is a really important one. As Gary mentioned in the introduction, the Human Security for All campaign was a 18-month-long collaboration with the United Nations, in particular the United Nations Trust Fund for Human Security, which ended in March. And WAAS is going to be continuing this very important project into the future. This first slide demonstrates the scope of the reach we had with all our partners. We ended up partnering with over 20 different organizations around the world, very diverse partners as well, as you can see from the list there. We even managed to collaborate with very old technology like the Amateur Radio Union. I think there's some interesting collaborations out there which people might not come to mind immediately, but I think there's still some very relevant organizations out there which we haven't explored yet. We collaborated with International Kids Film Festival in India. We have a very strong relationship with Spell Bee International in India, which reaches hundreds of thousands, if not millions of school kids. So I'll get onto that later. I have a slide on that, but it's very important that we are looking at education as well as policy. This particular slide here is an example of one of our partners, our biggest yet, the Consumer Technology Association. They hold the CES Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas once a year, 140,000 people from around the world, the leading tech innovators and tech leaders, and all the major technology brands. This is an event which is the closest, I think, to a world fair, if you want to call it that, where the world comes together to discuss new technologies, how it's going to be applied to the consumer world. So the potential of us at the Consumer Tech Show is huge, because we have the potential to influence millions, if not billions, of consumers around the world. This particular slide is the CEO of CTA, delivering the Human Security for All message to 1,500 people at the Leaders in Tech event in Vegas. I quickly just wanted to rewind a little bit and mention that in terms of collaboration, there was a comment made by Dr. Isabella Bunn earlier that said, see everything around us as an opportunity. And I think what WAAS has done with the HS4A campaign is exactly that. We've looked beyond the usual suspects and said, who can we collaborate with that's going to magnify the message of both WAAS and human security? And everywhere that the Human Security for All message went, by default, the WAAS message was tagged onto it. So I think there are many, many more people over the last 18 months who are now aware of the work of WAAS and what WAAS is. The other comment by Hans de Orwell earlier was, WAAS becoming overstretched by taking on too much. And I think we've demonstrated with the HS4A campaign that collaboration is one of those solutions, that we do not have to create our own campaigns from scratch. We can find partners who might even be stronger in that field that we can jump onto and collaborate with them. So we've seen the door open for WAAS in new and unusual ways. And the WAAS brand, as I said, is being seen by a much larger audience. This is the entrance to the CES exhibition. I think this breaks the world record for the largest WAAS logo usage ever. You can see it at the bottom there. It was projected onto a 4-story high interior building at the entrance. This is what greeted visitors, or 140,000 visitors to the CES show. If we can go to the next. CES, as a major supporter, we're now going to be going into our 3rd year with them. And we have discussed the idea of possibly looking at a meeting within a meeting at the event in Las Vegas. Having a tech and AI discussion hosted by WAAS within the parameters of the event itself, I think would be a very powerful symbol. I would also, as I go through these projects, I would also welcome people to make comments if they have any ideas of how they would like to become involved. We'd certainly welcome input and ideas of how WAAS fellows can become more involved in these projects. We will have a presence in January at CES again, and we're trying to put a very high-level panel together for the Global Mind session, of which the slide demonstrates it well. Gary giving a presentation at the Great Mind session. They only have 4 Great Mind sessions at the event, and we have managed to secure at least 2 every year, which is quite a prestigious thing to have accomplished. They don't give them out easily, but this is where tech leaders will listen to where the world's going, and we have a platform for that. I won't go through all these. You can read the figures for themselves, but this will give you an idea of the reach and extent of both HS4A and WAAS, being seen by millions of people. The support that we get from CES is huge. They also have around 5,000 members of the press attending the event, and we get exposure in their newsletters, their magazines, and plenty of social media coverage. This is some of the media outlets that we have appeared in. Wherever the HS4A campaign was mentioned, the implementing partners were mentioned, which was the United Nations, Trust Fund for Human Security, and WAAS as well. So as I said, by default, the WAAS name is being carried into all kinds of areas around the world that hasn't been exposed before. And we can go to the next. This is one of our WAAS Youth Fellows, Dora Damjan, who was on the youth panel earlier. We got an opportunity to deliver a message of peace on International Peace Day in Times Square, New York. So we managed to inject the WAAS brand into a very prestigious, high visibility area. And we can go to the next slide. One of the things we're trying to do as well is to look at the historic significance of WAAS. One of the things we did was we reached out to Charles Oppenheimer, who is Robert Oppenheimer's grandson, who is seen on the right-hand side in discussion with Gary. And we're looking at the historical significance of how WAAS was founded and what the relevance today is in terms of what the original charter of WAAS is. How does that translate into the problems of today? And we were speaking to Charles in particular about how we could close that circle of history with the next generation. This is just a quick example of a podcast that is broadcast by CES in the run-up to the show in Las Vegas. And we managed to get a few WAAS fellows involved in a podcast discussion in the run-up to the event itself. Another thing, this is an event called Leaders on Purpose in New York, which is it's currently being held in London right now as well. We invited WAAS fellows to participate in discussions with CEOs. I think, as has been mentioned in previous comments, it's very important to engage the business sector. Academia and science is obviously a very strong part of WAAS, but convincing those or enlightening those that are outside of the WAAS world, I think, is very important. Sometimes convincing people, who are not like-minded is actually more important. We can create more change by convincing others to change their mind. This is an example of EarthX, the previous slide. We were interviewed on EarthX TV. So we had some fellows there as well, giving their thoughts to a broadcast network, which goes out to millions of people as well. The next few slides are just examples of actual projects that we are going to be taking forward with HS4A. The one is Interparliamentary Union, IPU. It's very exciting that we are going to be developing could we just go back to the previous slide, please? We're going to be doing a toolkit for parliamentarians. This is being led by WAAS Executive Committee member Donato Kiniga-Pasigli. And there was an event in Geneva in March where human security managed to be included in their declaration at the end of the conference, which is quite significant. So WAAS is intimately involved in creating this toolkit for parliamentarians. And we're hoping that the scale of this potential is huge because parliamentarians would be going back to 190 different jurisdictions and would be trying to implement human security principles. The Inter-Academy Partnership is going to be releasing a statement later this year. It's being prepared by WAAS fellow Phoebe Konduri, and the concept note for it was originally done by WAAS Secretary General Janani. So that is in circulation at the moment. It's out of the 150 academies, 75 have already endorsed it, and 5 more are needed for it to become accepted. So we're getting very close to that. But this is one of the examples of how the Human Security Campaign can actually influence policy and become inserted into very important documents that are being seen by a very large audience. International Year of Sciences for Sustainable Development. This is an ongoing series of talks by WAAS around the necessity of science and human security. WAAS is a member of the Earth Humanity Coalition, and WAAS is also going to be rolling out a series of ongoing seminars and discussions, which will culminate later this year in September in Belgrade, where a conference will be held, titled the World Conference on Science and Art for Sustainability. I think it's very important that these, the results of these conferences are captured and put into reports that then go out further to the people that were involved and to other people as well. beyond the science community who can look at these documents to inform policy. One of the more exciting projects, as I mentioned at the beginning, was the relationship with SPELB International and also the International Film Festival for Kids. These have the potential of reaching millions of school children, and SPELB is a firm partner with WAAS. They have the educational resources and the reach to deliver our message to a very wide audience. We had a great workshop last year that was run with the International Film Festival for Kids. We had 200 schools involved, and 10,000 students were actually viewing the workshop, where we went through how human security relates to movie making and crafting narratives for film. And so we are busy planning once again for this year another interaction with them. So planning is underway for that, and we're going to see if we can reach a wider audience. Phoebe Konduri, Professor Phoebe, who is a WAAS fellow, is leading a measurement, evaluation, and project performance project. And as she always says, if you can't measure it, you can't imagine, you can't manage it, and you can't improve it. What we've done with the Human Security Campaign is, and this is a requirement by the UN, is to submit a progress report, which we have done. And we have put the progress report up publicly on the Human Security website. And what I'm going to do, it's impossible to go through an hour's worth of reports, but in the chat bar, you'll see I've put the link to our progress report. It'll take about an hour to read through it. But if you'd like to see more information of how we are collecting proof of success and proof of how it's working, I think that would make a very interesting read for people who are interested in that. And I think one of the major things of HS4A is that we've pulled the metrics and the numbers together to demonstrate success, which of course is very important for future donations, for donors, foundations who want to support WAAS. We need to prove that we're working and that we are delivering on a set of objectives that have been laid out. It's also a proof that WAAS can take on a third-party brief. The United Nations approached WAAS to run the campaign. It shows that we've delivered, and it shows a whole lot of results and metrics that we can point to show success. So very quickly, this slide shows that the advertising value equivalent, for those who don't know, in the advertising industry, it's a metric that shows, and we have tools to measure this. We have online tools we've been using to monitor the campaign. It shows that we hit $367,000 worth of advertising value equivalent. So if we had to pay for that, if you were just an ordinary agency that needed to pay for that exposure, that's what you would have had to pay for it. And that's what we managed to generate on an extremely small budget. We reached 4.9 million people through social media. We promoted ourselves over 25 World Days, World Water Day, World Environment Day, and made alignments there with new organizations we hadn't dealt with before. We achieved 400 stories in the mainstream press, many of them on those logos I showed you earlier of very high-profile established media channels. And then for me, one of the biggest things is if you go to Google Trends and you punch in the word human security, you'll actually see from 2022, there's been a marked increase in search results for human security. So just on a very broad global level, we've managed to raise the awareness and the importance of human security. People are now searching for those terms. Obviously, all of these projects that I've just mentioned are going to be continuing. They all need support, financial support in particularly. So I would encourage anybody who wants to become involved in any of these new partnerships. If anyone has ideas for funding opportunities, there is a WAAS funding committee that's been established to filter funds into each of these projects that were mentioned earlier by Ketan as well. And if anybody personally would like to donate. We're looking at new ways of funding WAAS going forward, bequests, donations on a regular basis, and of course, including WAAS fellows more fundamentally. I just want to quickly end off with the fact that I spent the last couple of weeks ago, I was at the Yale archives looking through all the archives of WAAS going back to the 1960s. And one of the things that stood out for me was that WAAS originally was geared towards creating policy change in the world. I found references to Henry Moore and Salvador Dali, the artists, on a WAAS project in Cyprus. There were letters to the White House. There were letters to Henry Kissinger. The economist Milton Friedman was answering WAAS questionnaires. And these results were compiled by WAAS and sent out to thousands of influential people around the world. Captains of industry, heads of United Nations departments and other big think tanks around the world. And those people used that document to inform their policy and planning. And I think, there's no reason why WAAS, shouldn't get back to that same position again in the future, where it becomes looked at as a real resource of knowledge that can go out into the world and affect policy change.
Wonderful. Grant, thank you. I gave you a lot more time, Grant, because I know how important this is and how well it's made an external impact and promoted the brand and the reach of WAAS. Luckily, I'm doing the next session, so I'm going to help us catch up by being really brief and giving the key messages. So you would have just heard from Grant how important the HS4A campaign was. Financing sustainable development to help close the gaps is also, of course, a key endeavor and a massive challenge for the world. And here, in my role as the chair of Force for Good, we're a partner of the World Academy to see if we can come up with the intellectual thinking, the potential solutions, and the execution of those to see if we can make an impact. Here's how we're thinking about that and the initiatives that we're taking. So the SDGs are the cornerstone. The mission is to originate, influence, and execute systemic change through innovative strategies, solutions, all sorts of initiatives that leverage technology to make that impact. The program has some very key aspects to it. The first is scaling global high-impact solutions that will actually help close the gap. The report that we use is called Capital as a Force for Good. It's produced by Force for Good. And it looks at the different ways in which the gap has been growing and then how that gap might be closed. The aspects of it that are focused on include policy, social and environmental capital, technology, inclusive finance, NGOs, and the individual, and how different stakeholders can work together to make that impact. 6 transformative initiatives have been identified, and each of these has a project plan that leads to execution that potentially can be funded either through the private sector or through governments, and each of them has a partner to see if we can progress them. The third aspect of the program is systemic change for sustainable development through transforming how capital and financial systems actually flow across the world. And we're excited that we actually have the raw data from 125 financial institutions across the world that allows us to actually understand capital flows and how they go from inception, from the individual, all the way through the system. The 125 companies that we analyze provide us with data that is ESG, corporate sustainable responsibility, and also how they impact different stakeholders and fund the SDGs themselves. So it's an enormous amount of data, something like 450 data points across 125 institutions. The fourth aspect, which is quite important, is technology as a force for good. And as Grant said, there's a report called Technology as a Force for Good, which is presented at CES. It was launched 2 years ago at CES, and this year also we presented the second version. Essentially, it looks at how the technology industry is grappling with 3 particular things: technology for security, technology for sustainability, and technology for creating a superior world. It also collects a huge amount of information and has identified 19 technologies that are the focus of the tech industry worldwide, almost in a competition or a race to create the future. This is presented at CES on the Great Minds platform, and on the day before, really, at their research event. So it has a lot of credibility with the tech industry. 100 leading tech companies are the subject that we look at to do that. As an example, last year, we managed to get a lot of media attention on that too. This year, we actually picked up the pace even more. So we managed to attract two particular people who were very interesting for the tech community. One is the UN Tech Envoy, Amandeep Singh Gill, who spoke about how the UN is trying to foster and agree a compact for AI. That was an important part of it, of the event. And we had Gary interviewing the UN Tech Envoy and others to speak about this need for us to form policy. So the World Academy is absolutely the center of this discussion. The second was we had the former head of science and technology at the CIA speak about how, in his time at the CIA, how he saw technology changing and how technology is potentially a force for good and a force for peace. And so very interesting to see a man who, if you watch James Bond films, would have been Q, change his role over time to start to look at technology for social impact. He also spoke about AI and how AI can make a huge impact too for good. And so, as I say, we see Force for Good and the World Academy of Art and Science working hand in hand to see if we can create the new dialogues that need to happen in the era of financing the sustainable development gaps. To illustrate some of the initiatives, and I'll pick one in particular and keep it very short. Last year, what we managed to do was to take an initiative, mass financial inclusion, which cuts across all the four initiatives I just described. And we looked across the world to see what the technologies were that were at the leading edge of making sure that individuals who were excluded from the financial system could be included. These are private sector solutions and public sector solutions. Ultimately, we fixed on one in particular, which had a sustainable impact track record. It turned out to be something invented and rolled out by the Indian government. It's called the India Stack. It is a stack of technologies for digital public goods, effectively. It has a layer where you register your identity and a series of layers which ultimately lead to opening a bank account, giving free access to a payment system to the poor, giving them a savings product, a healthcare product, so they're insured, and accident cover. So it's a powerful financial suite that is facilitated by technology. The Indian government had rolled it out, and as I understand it, they've just crossed 500 million users, 525 million people have opened a bank account to do that. Our simple idea, working again, Force for Good as the partner of the World Academy, was could we get the Indian government to roll that out and offer it for free to the rest of the world? The Indian government had this sort of thinking in its mind already. And what we managed to do was to work with the Indian ambassador to the UN, who hosted a major event at the UN at the ECOSOC chamber, where the offer was made publicly last year in May. It was fantastic to see us actually pass that milestone. There are 6 countries that are already signed up, and 50 will sign up in the next 5 to 6 years. So it's taking an idea all the way through to the execution. That's the aim, and that's what we think we managed to achieve. Now the big task is, of course, still ahead, because full execution requires the funding of various countries to change their financial system so that it's far more inclusive. And Force for Good and the World Academy will work with these countries wherever required to see if that funding can be attracted so that execution happens. And the example India set of 500 million people having financial inclusion gets rolled out across the global south and other parts of the world too, where there is a lack of inclusion. Let me stop it there. That should be a taster, of course. We would love you, if you are interested in this subject, to reach out to us and tell us how you'd like to be involved in this endeavor to see if we can close the gap. We have just over 5 years left, and the gap is very closable. That's what we find. let me hand to the next presentation on transforming education and learning. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask Ralph. Ralph, would you mind keeping this to 5 to 6 minutes so we have some time for some good questions at the end too? Thank you.
I'm new to the board, so I've been really studying all these activities of WAAS, and I want to begin, first of all, by thanking Gary and the Mother Service Society and so many others who have contributed. I have seen WAAS do so many things on a shoestring budget. And I will say, in the last presentation, words are very important. Leadership, thought, and action. The new tagline for WAAS really requires funding. So I think it's really important to hear your thoughts about how we can actually raise money and build and expand the influence of WAAS, as everyone talked about throughout this entire General Assembly. I see that as expanding the use and the inclusion of fellows, but also, as we've begun to do, reaching outside of WAAS, not only in partnerships with major organizations, but at the grassroots, particularly with education. So again, we have identified a whole number of areas where education would be at the core, and I think that's foundational to the transformation in thinking, the heart and the mind, and art and science that WAAS stands for. So these are the areas that we have initially identified for seeking funding with specific projects in the field of education. And I would say, as one who spent my whole lifetime in my career in education, we're trying to break the barriers of siloed thinking, disciplinary thinking, because we're transdisciplinary thinking in everything we do, and more human connection, human-centered work in education, connection to the planet. So let's move and I'll highlight a couple of areas. One would be to actually focus on the HS4A as an opportunity for transdisciplinary education. So we've seen that technology, the internet with broad bandwidth, has allowed for the massification of education. What we need to focus on is content. How do we use the new technology to bring the content? And there are 8 pillars with the HS4A initiative. And so how can we focus on transforming educational systems? And you'll see one is a major project we hope we could create, which would develop curricula on human security at all levels, and particularly train faculty to introduce each of these 8 areas as opportunities: food security, water security, political stability, each of these, sustainability, each of these areas, and specifically work for career paths for students. So this would be one area that would be creating content. Another major focus is on job skills that are going to be created by, and many that will be replaced by, artificial intelligence. And so the range that people talk about is 40 to 80%, not right away, but over time. How can we fill that skills gap? So we already have green skill jobs. How do we connect that to AI and really focus on training the kind of thinking about how to use AI, and particularly the discernment between dis and misinformation, and actually using AI in positive and ethical ways. And again, values, we need a value system here that really can help us use AI in positive way. Let me just go back to I'll say, with respect to both this and the previous slide, I'd like to see us focus on what's working. People need to see concrete examples when we heard the youth conversation about the Green Hope Foundation. What can we do on the ground that's actually working? And what are the skills that are needed? And how can we, with human security, with AI, actually show what's working? We also, next is, Alberto has worked on trauma-informed care. We've worked in Ukraine, in the Middle East. We'd like to expand that to really make this a global training. That trauma-informed care is very different from traditional psychotherapy. And how do we bring the work of the WAAS together in programs that will help deal with the psychological and the physical impact of what we're seeing with human security and the wars that are going on. This is a huge project that's needed. We really need to focus more on, Grant talked about Spelby International, and if we can expand that at all levels and work with collaborate with others, we need to find how can we introduce human security at all levels into existing curricula, and at the same time, connection to the planet. There is a major project to develop a postgraduate program in business, building on a lot of the thinking that WAAS has done in this area. And Gary, particularly in the Mother Service Society, is exploring developing this whole new business school, entrepreneur school that will connect to human security and sustainability. I think that will be it. I'll just, we also think that we could develop courseware that could be introduced, used by other institutions. We've already done a lot of thinking about new ways, new kinds of courses that could be done, short courses, longer courses, particularly in doing work with, in affiliation with other groups. I think this would be a wonderful opportunity, in addition to a full curriculum, for individual courses or modules, small modules that could be introduced into existing courses to bring about greater transdisciplinarity and expand thinking.
Thank you. Thank you, Ralph, very much. You've very quickly laid out an enormous agenda for WAAS to be involved in transforming education. Nebojša, can I ask you to pick up on science, human security, and sustainable development?
Thank you, Ketan. I will present here very briefly the Science, Human Security and Sustainable Development Program of WAAS, which comprises 5 projects. The mission of the program is to project and apply a specific integrated approach to the existential problems and challenges facing the Earth and humanity today, based on the 7 human security dimensions and the 17 sustainable development goals. Since these problems have complex and multiple disciplinary character, and the efforts of scientific communities worldwide are mostly limited to separated disciplines, this approach has been made holistic and multiple disciplinary, meaning that it promotes systemic, disciplinary, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary research, strongly supported by all other science stakeholders in both the public and private sector. WAAS is organizing a series of conferences on sustainable and secure development of a few specific science and technology themes. The realization of the project is going on as of a project of the Earth Humanity Coalition in close cooperation with UNESCO. The coalition was established in April this year with the aim to prepare and implement various programs within the International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development, proclaimed by the UN General Assembly in August last year. WAAS is one of its founding members. The conferences will be the following: World Conference on Science and Art for Sustainability, already mentioned, to be held in September next year in Belgrade, Serbia. Then World Conference on Big Science with Accelerators to take place in the second quarter of 2026 or 2027 in a large international center acting in the fields of science with accelerators and accelerator technologies. Then World Conference on Multilateralism and New Economy, which should be organized by the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in the second quarter of 2028 or 2029 in Beijing. Then World Conference on Sciences for Food, Water and Energy Security. And finally, World Conference on Big Science in Space. With these conferences, we will cover the whole decade, which will last until 2033. WAAS has also prepared the project of Sciences for Sustainable Development as a project of the Earth Humanity Coalition to be realized in close cooperation with UNESCO. The project includes 2 series of webinars on science for human security and science and art for sustainability, and 4 platforms in science and technology for cooperation between the global north and the global south. This is very important, devoted to sustainable and secure development. On the platforms on big science with accelerators, multilateralism and new economy, sciences for food, water, energy security, and big science in space. The activities comprised by the project will be focused on policies and regulatory measures aimed to provide sustainable and secure development on the national, regional, and global scales. The third project within the program is devoted to technology for human security. It has been already mentioned in this session by Ketan. I'm moving to the fourth project.
Okay.
This is the fourth project within the program, and it is devoted to research for human security. The aim is to disseminate worldwide a statement on human security initiated by WAAS and prepared by a working group headed by the Inter-Academy Partnership. This has been also mentioned by Grant. Besides, the project would include a series of webinars on research for human security to be organized by WAAS and other IAP members. Okay, this is the fifth project within the program, and it is devoted to science diplomacy for human security and sustainable development. It has been discussed in the yesterday's session with the same title. The discussion included all 3 pillars of science diplomacy, being science for diplomacy, science in diplomacy, and science and diplomacy for science, which cover the power of science to improve relations between countries, even where official relations are strained or severe. The way scientific knowledge and expertise help to inform diplomatic objectives and foreign policy, and the ability of diplomacy to facilitate scientific cooperation across borders. This has been all for me for the moment. Thank you very much.
Nebojša, thank you very much. You've added a very important ingredient that was needed on science and technology and the S in WAAS. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chandrasekhar, would you mind talking about this? And again, about 5 minutes, please.
Thank you all for being here today. AI for Education is a project that the World Academy launched a few months ago. We believe that education is the key to unlocking human potential, and with AI, we can make learning more accessible, personalized, and effective. When personal computers were first introduced, it took a long time for them to become part of the educational system. Even today, many students in developing countries don't have access to computers and the internet. Even in developed countries, many public-funded schools rely on old, used, or refurbished donated computers, leaving many students excluded. In contrast, mobile phones have had a much deeper and wider reach. Today, almost every teenager in developing countries too has access to a mobile phone and the internet. This widespread accessibility offers a unique opportunity to bridge the education gap. WAAS is developing AI courses to help teachers become efficient facilitators of learning and enable students to use artificial intelligence to acquire knowledge. While there are many AI courses available to them, our approach is different. Our mission is to empower students with the principles of learning using AI tools, keeping their curiosity alive, fostering original thinking, and creating personalized learning avenues. Our courses focus on practical applications in everyday settings and emphasize the useful deployment of AI without losing the human touch. For example, while some might tell students they can write a book in minutes using AI tool, we question the value of such content. These quick creations often contribute to digital clutter. A book or an article should be an expression and an extension of the author's consciousness, experience, and knowledge. AI should bring out the creativity and originality of the author. Our courses help teachers and students understand that AI is a tool to enhance their mental faculties and enrich their creativity and thinking. We also recognize the need for programs to prepare both teachers and students to fully utilize the power of generative AI, enhancing learning outcomes while reducing time requirements. In higher education, we need action plans to speed up changes. Students in all areas need the right knowledge and skills for jobs and continuous learning in our fast-changing world. To address this, WAAS is creating a prototype for an AI training program for medical professionals. This program will use digital tools, an online platform, and a global network of partners to bring AI into various fields of higher education. We are also developing an AI-based learning app, mobile app, that offers interactive, self-paced, customizable, and personalized learning experiences for both formal and informal education, as well as for lifelong learning. In today's world, where knowledge is abundant, the most valuable skill students can acquire is learning how to learn. Our goal is ambitious yet achievable, to reach as many students and teachers as possible over the next few years, starting with India and the UK. What I have discussed so far are just examples of the projects WAAS would like to take up related to AI for learning. We also envision an AI-based decision-making system for effective decision-making, considering all essential factors, both objective and subjective. Leveraging AI to help people learn to think outside the box from a transdisciplinary perspective. To do research on developing an AI-based global news monitoring system to identify fake news and rebuild trust in the media. This is a very ambitious agenda. Our success will depend on three key factors: identifying talented fellows within WAAS who can and would like to contribute to these projects, identifying partner organizations with common values and objectives to collaborate with WAAS, securing sufficient funding. Your support is crucial to the success of the project. By contributing this cause, you're helping to build a future where every student, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to benefit from the advancement in technology.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sekar. Thank you very much for putting it so succinctly too. John, you knew you would get squeezed because you were last, but please, let me hand to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ketan. First of all, this is a very exciting agenda, all the areas we've discussed. I've been a fundraiser for both impact events, commercial and nonprofit for some time in different capacities, and this is an agenda that I think has a real voice to the market. And so what I wanted to use is that word voice, and I won't go line by line here or bullet by bullet given the time, but I'll frame this up. This is an area that may represent a new area for WAAS that I think is very important because it gives people a voice, and it does it at scale. We've talked about putting the human element back in human security. This is very much that. This is about the humans and reaching humans at scale, giving them a voice, and in the same way, they give us a voice. They give us as WAAS a voice because we can speak for them in places they can't easily get to, such as the Interparliamentary Union or influencing governments and policymakers generally in the areas of education and what that agenda wants to be. So what we want to do here is develop a series of initiatives, as you can see on this page, that on this slide, that give us the opportunity to speak for the people, if you will, and to represent them in a very new way, because we will understand and have put together their issues, their perspectives. And that really opens us up to a different level of, in my view, of validity to the world, a different kind of standing and a different kind of scale. And I think, as I said, it's a two-way street, us representing them and them to us. So I think it's a really interesting addition to the initiatives that we've talked about today that will have a lot of resonance in the fundraising community and increase the positioning of WAAS. And again, I'm watching the clock, so I'll just be quick here. One thing to note is that the cost of doing something like this, like the companies that you see on the right-hand part of this slide, like Facebook and YouTube, Instagram and others, in the past, has been extraordinarily expensive to set all of these kinds of things up. In the present, it is getting much, much less expensive and also much more valid. Again, there's a role for AI here in terms of analysis and so on. And also it's a behavior that the better part of the world understands now how to interact with social media. So we are capturing this opportunity at a very interesting time when the world understands it and behavior can be adopted, when the cost structure for doing something like this is very low. And there's no real other forum like the one that we are talking about creating here that gives a voice to the level of a global level of humanity and ties into the other types of agendas and programs that we've discussed here today. So I think I've hit the hour, Ketan, so I'll turn it back to you.
John, that's fantastic. Thank you. And our partner and collaborator on the development path from 1.0 to 6.0 is CLI AI, right?
Yeah, so we already have identified AI engineering and supply for this that understands this mission, and again at a low cost can really help us put in place many of the nuts and bolts and analytics level to this effort.
Wonderful. We've heard from everybody in terms of what the programs are. There is a huge number of initiatives and sub-initiatives and a vast number of potential partners and existing partners that are working with WAAS to make this happen. Let me hand back to Gary for the closing words. Gary.
Thank you, Ketan. Thank you for all of the presentations and all of you who are working on these very exciting projects. I don't think anything's left to be said on this except let's go forward, and we want and need the help of as many of our active participation of our fellows to make this happen. We've got ideas we think the world needs that can really make us move from ideas to impact. We're moving ahead wherever we have resources or connections, but we realize this is just the beginning of a whole new phase in the work of the Academy, and we can only do this when we all do it together. So thanks very much for wonderful presentations and great work.